So I received my first two degrees, Bachelor of Science in Architecture and Bachelor of Architecture in 2001. And this was at a time when AutoCAD and ArchiCAD were just starting to become the norm in most offices. And so when I went through college, starting in 96 and then graduating in 2001, I went through my entire time in architecture school doing hand drafting. It was then that seed of understanding how important embodied cognition was planted in me. I didn't realize what it was at the time. I didn't recognize it. I didn't have a name for it. But embodied cognition was planted. It wasn't until years later when in my readings and my studies that that feeling was validated, and it sprouted and continues to bloom now in Drawn to Place. That's where we are. It's part of Drawn to Place really is this embodied cognition. And for those that don't know what embodied cognition is, it's this theory that our thinking and designing isn't just a brain function. It's not strictly you thinking. It's not just strictly brain power. Embodied cognition says that it's deeply shaped by our physical bodies, our sensations, actions, interactions with our environment. Now, that could be on a large scale, could be outside, it could be hiking and engaging, getting in the dirt, trees, water, being out in the actual world, that physical environment, that is also part of our thinking. It can also be small scale. It can be just the interaction of our hand physically writing a word or doing drawings on a pad of paper. It's not the clacking, clickety clack on keyboard. It's not the clicking of our mouse. And there is a lot of debate, even drawing on a tablet does not have the same benefit. You are still drawing, you're using your hand, you're watching it move, but it doesn't have that same embodied cognition that happens when you use a pencil or a pen on a piece of paper or paint on a canvas or what have you. So you're seeing it. So that's what I want to talk about in this episode of Drawn to Place, low tech practices and how they expose high level blind spots, which is a big thing. Hi, I'm Sean, former architect, educator, teacher, founder of Drawn to Place, which is a project that's helping people connect where they are through seeing and noticing. So there's a quiet assumption baked into creative modern tools that more options make us better thinkers. More brushes, more layers, more tools, more flexibility, copy and paste. Hey, but in practice, I found the opposite to be true. Very much so. Having been a designer, having been a teacher from kindergarten to through college, having been an artist, being in various grad schools, I've seen this in practice. I've seen it the opposite to be true, that the more tools does not mean that it makes us better thinkers. In practice, I found the opposite to be true. Some of the most meaningful insights I've had about place, attention, design, and even creativity itself have come from doing something radically low tech. A physical sketchbook, a fixed grid, and the same subject over and over and over again. Now, I interact and I do a lot of stuff with drawing, which you know this if you've been following me at all. If this is your first time, I'm telling you now. Drawing is something that I've done for decades and I absolutely love it. It doesn't matter if you're good or bad at drawing. I do urge you to start sketching and doing drawing. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. You can also write. It's a journal thing too. You just do it in a very fixed way, and the grid is something that you can do that way as well. But I do urge you with drawing because that there's a lot of benefit to it. Even if you think it's not good, you don't have to show it to anybody ever. But it's this physical sketchbook, fixed grid, same subject over and over again. And that's why we're really talking about low-tech practices, exposing the high-level blind spots, and why the grid specifically is doing far more cognitive work than it appears to be doing on the surface. If you've been following me, I do grid systems I'm doing Windows. If you follow my Instagram or TikTok, I'm doing a grid system with 99 Disney windows. I'm doing a grid system of garage doors that are in my neighborhood. After the first of the year, I'm going to start one that is front doors. You can also do ones that are leaves, mushrooms. You can pick anything and you just set up a grid system. It's extremely powerful. What's the problem with using digital tools? What's the problem with these high-tech ways of thinking or sketching or drawing or paying attention? recording your thoughts. What's wrong with them? Well, there's too much choice. Too much choice hides what matters. Right? Digital tools are powerful. I use them professionally. I am not anti-technology at all. This is not like a Luddite saying, get rid of all this technology and get off my grass, right? That's not it at all. I love technology, but digital tools introduce something that's called continuous decision making. What size should it be? Should I zoom in? What crop? Can I undo it? Changing brushes, try some. Undo is the least favorite tool of mine. When I'm teaching beginning drawing at the college level, I I teach beginning drawing, and you have to have a physical sketchbook. It's not a digital drawing class. You want to take a digital drawing class, you go ahead. You're not allowed to do digital drawing while you're in my class and while we're working on it because of undo. Undo has so many negative benefits to it when you're learning how to draw. Now it's super helpful later when you've already know how to draw and you're doing something, but in the sketching phase, in the learning to draw phase, your brain changes and can see the mistakes you made, and that's how you learn. But if you're constantly undoing a line, you do a line that's wrong, undo, do a line that's wrong, undo, instead of putting down a line with a pencil or a pen, not erasing it but going over it again in the angle that it should be, you learn so much more doing that and not using a digital tool to just undo so it looks clean and beautiful at the end. You get all these messy lines all over because you have found the shape that you're looking for through repetition and seeing what didn't work. So now you have to change it. Okay. Try something else. So every one of these choices pulls attention away from seeing and toward managing the tool. See, now you're managing the tool instead of seeing what's there. Draw a salt shaker, draw a garage door, draw this stack of blocks. That's what you should be focusing on and noticing and seeing. But instead, if you're doing it digitally, sometimes you're managing the tool more than you are focused on just the drawing. And research in cognitive psychology consistently shows us that excessive choice increases cognitive load, which reduces your working memory, diminishes perceptual sensitivity. In other words, your brain is so busy deciding that it's worse at noticing, or even shuts down, not even noticing anything. You're so busy trying to decide what you should be doing and where you should be doing it, and hoping that it looks a certain way because you're using this tool that almost demands perfection, you get worse at noticing. That's the first blind spot. We confuse flexibility with perception. It's not. Flexibility is not perception. So let's talk about the grid. The grid is as a perceptual constraint, which is a good thing, because this is where the grid comes in. My grid does three quiet, very critical things. It fixes the size. So let's say you're doing garage doors. Okay, I've already drawn the size. It fixes the proportions. I know exactly how big my drawing is going to be. I know exactly what the proportions are going to be. And it fixes the subject. All those are fixed things drawn. They're not a line in the sand. They are chiseled into stone. They are fixed. You know the size, you know the proportion, you know what the subject is. When I open up my book right here, so it's this book right here that I have, I know exactly what I'm drawing and how big it's going to be. And this whole page will eventually be filled up with garage doors, and they're all slightly different. Right? I'm doing the exact same thing. I know what I'm drawing when I pick this up. I don't have to wonder. I don't have to look at a blank page and stare at it and be like, what am I going to draw today? What's the composition going to be? How big am I going to make it? All those decisions have to be made before you ever draw. And some of us end up not drawing anything because we're so worried we can't make a decision. Here's the windows, right? Same thing. I have 99 windows. This proportion, this entire page will be filled up with windows at some point, which will make a really cool looking page. Like these will make cool pages. But the whole point of it is that I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm taking all that decision making out. Okay, those decisions are made, which means when I sit down, my attention has one job. That's to see what is actually there. Now I'm looking at the differences in this same thing that I've drawn over and over and over again. And this aligns directly with all the research that's been done on constraint-based creativity, which shows the limited parameters improve problem solving, pattern recognition, and originality over time. I love it when I'm given constraints in a design problem or a brief. If I read a brief and it reads like a checklist of all these things that you cannot do, or that all these things that must be in the design, that's, I really like that, because that allows me to be extremely creative and push up against the sides of all of these constraints they've given me. I love constraint based creativity because it forces my creativity to be more creative, and it forces me to, within these constraints, now I have to be very subtle with my details to change it, because now your subtle details have a huge impact. And the grid is that exact same way. It's not taking your creativity and saying squashing it down, it's delaying the creativity until your perception has done its job. Because here's why it makes you more creative and not less creative at all. This is the counterintuitive part. Because when you remove the pressure to be creative, quote unquote, something else happens. You don't have to worry about being creative. Then you start to, when you're doing the same subject over and over, you start to notice asymmetries. You start to see the rhythm within the subject. You pick up on the repetition. You pick up on the deviation. You start recognizing your patterns you've never consciously named before. Patterns that you've never seen before start to emerge. And because of that, because of looking at the same thing over and over, doing the same thing, same subject, creativity emerges as a byproduct of attention. It's not an act of force. You can't force creativity anyway. Some people try to. I'm going to sit down and be creative. No, you're not. Do the boring stuff. Creativity comes out of that. Studies on observational drawing, embodied cognition show that hand-drawn analog practices strengthen neural pathways associated with spatial reasoning, memory, and insight more effectively than any screen-based interaction. Hand-drawn analog practices strengthen those neural pathways. There's a bunch of studies on it. I mean, when you're journaling, there's studies done on if you journal, write it out by hand, because it enforces and strengthens those neural pathways associated with the reasoning, memory, and insight. In other words, the grid trains your brain to detect differences with sameness, which is the foundation of creative insight. So let's talk about physical, because the physical is faster than digital. And I'm sure some of you are thinking no. And again, I'm not against digital at all. Just in doing this, it's one of the blind spots. You assume digital is faster, when in reality, physical sketchbooks offer instant access, spatial memory, because you remember where things live on the page when you drew them, and tactile feedback, which improves recall and synthesis. The tactile feedback of you actually seeing your fingers making the mark. If you're typing on a computer or you're using a mouse, there's a disconnect, because the typing is happening down here. You're looking up at the screen. There's a disconnect between that your fingers are actually making those things, right? There's no disconnect when you have a piece of paper here and you're watching your hand make that mark. There's no disconnect right there, okay? The instant access has to do with there's no boot up time. There's no finding the file. Now, what else happens is that while you're flipping through your sketchbook, you're going to see other sketches you've done, right? Maybe I was looking for the warthog drawing, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I did that orca too, right? You see them side by side. Digital files, you don't see that. So research on external cognition shows that physical artifacts, paper, notebooks, spatial layouts act as extensions of your memory. Flipping through a sketchbook allows you to see time, not just files. You don't just retrieve information, you're re-experiencing the context. That's why insights surface faster. You remember what you felt like, probably where you were sitting, what the weather was like, how you felt when you were doing that drawing or writing that passage, because you're taken back to that. That doesn't happen with digital. Here's why this really trains, and this is the deeper payoff of the grid system. The grid is not a drawing system, it's a seeing system. Because over time, it trains attention stability, pattern literacy, comfort with repetition, sensitivity to small differences. You start to see those very subtle differences, and you trust in the process over performance. And perhaps most importantly, it reveals a blind spot many of us carry, which is we think creativity is adding, but oftentimes it begins with subtracting. What can you take away from this That's where the creativity happens. So low-tech practices don't compete with high-tech tools. They're not trying to. They're two very different things. The low-tech practices prepare us to use the high-tech tools wisely. And the grid isn't nostalgic, it's strategic, right? It's trusting that process of using a grid and doing the same subject over and over. It's how you stop trying to be creative and start noticing why creativity shows up on its own. So I'm Sean. This is Drawn to Place. Thank you for being here. Follow me here if you aren't already. We're over on Instagram, TikTok. Follow my newsletter on Substack. All those links are below. Share this with someone you care about, your family, your friends, your coworkers, design team you might be working with, and keep noticing. Until next time, I'm Sean Ross. This is Drawn to Place.